Hello, this is Michael, and welcome back to the Learning to Program using the Godot game engine. Alright, today what we're going to do is start on a new project called Guess My Number. As a kid, you probably played this with your friends, and basically we're going to do a version of this game where the computer will pick a number between 1 and 10, and you'll make a guess at it, or the player will make a guess at that number, and the game will tell you whether you're high or low. Alright, so let's start a new project, and we're going to call it, I'm going to go to my working folder, dev Godot projects. I'm going to change the project to Guess My Number, create folder. So I've got my project path correct. I'm going to hit create and edit. This is going to be another 2D game, and it's going to be very similar to the Hello World project. Matter of fact, it's going to build quite a bit on it. And before I get started, I want to draw out what I want my game to look like. So I'm going to pull up this drawing tablet, and let's draw this out real quick. So I'm going to have a window, and in that window I could have a panel, and I want to have a title up at the top so people know what game they're playing. And then I'd like to have, let's see, I want to have some feedback right here. So that would be the result of whether they were high or low or guessed the number correctly. And then I want to have a text box right here for people to type in. That'll be the input. And then last, I want to have a button over here. Right, that you can click. Right there. Alright, so I think this will generally be what the game will look like, and so let's get started on it. So over here in my scene, I need a basic root node, right? And I'll just call that main. I'm going to need a panel under that. Give me a nice little background. I'm going to drag it out, and then I'm going to grab the handle, expand it to fill the area of my viewport that I'm looking for. Roughly center it. Underneath my panel, I'm going to add a label, and this one will be my title that'll go across the top. And so here I'm going to call it Guess My Number in the text property of that label. And of course that's much too small for a title, so let's scale that up. We'll go with 3.3. Yeah, there we go. Looks pretty good. And next I'm going to need another label, so I'm going to add that. I'm not going to add it to the label that I already have because I don't want it to be a child of this label. I want it to be another child of the panel. So I'm going to right click on the panel and click Add Child Node and pick another label. And this one, I'm going to scoot down here, and this one I'm going to rename this one. And the reason I'm going to rename it is because later we're going to be accessing it from code. So by renaming it, I'll have a better name to access it by. So I'll call it label result. And I'm going to give it some default text, and I'm going to say your guess was, like that. And let's scale it up just a little bit under rect, and then scale, and instead of 3, let's just go with 2. Alright. Okay, that looks pretty good. And next we needed an input box, right? So again, from the panel, I'm going to add another child node, and these are called line edit. Yeah, there we go. Line edit. And so I'm going to put it about right here. I can make it a little bit bigger if I like to. And I can give it a default text, and since my number goes between 0 and 10, the best guess would always be the number 5. So let's put that in by default, and that'll help get the player started. And I need to rename that one because I'm going to be needing to access that one as well. So let's call that, instead of line edit, let's just call it edit, or line edit guess. Alright, so that'll be the player's guess. And finally we need that button. So again, panel, click the plus button, and we're going to look for a button. And there we go. And I'm going to drag it over. Oops. Grab it in the center, drag it over. I'm going to put it next to the thing there, next to the input. And let's add some default text so that it's not just an empty button. I won't have any reason why I should click it. So let's call it guess, like that, or make guess, like that. Alright, so now I've got a button, and I can expand it this way a little bit, make it stand out a little bit more. Got my input, and I've got my result. Everything's named. I can even change the name here, and we'll see why that's significant here in a minute. Button make. There we go. We'll see that. Oh, yeah, we'll see why that's significant in a minute. First, let's run our game. And so in order to do that, it's going to ask me to save my scene. So I'm going to say yes. It's going to name it main after the root node there, so that's fine. Save. And it should run. Alright, there's my game. And if I click my button, nothing happens. You can tell it's being clicked, but nothing's happening, nothing's changing. Everything's staying the same. And that's expected. We haven't added any logic yet to our game. So the first thing I want to do is I'd like to set some defaults. I want to change a few things when the game starts. So specifically, I want to change this your guess was, and let's clear that out so that they don't see that when the game starts. So up here on main, I'm going to add a script. I can click this little script button, or I can right click, attach script. I'm going to leave all the defaults. They're fine the way they are. And create. Now, this ready function, as we remember from the hello world, is run only once when the game starts. I'm going to clear out that default stuff, and I'm going to access my label result, and I'm going to set it, the text property, to be an empty string. So to do that, I'm going to use get node, and then I need to access it through the panel, and then label result, just like that, in my string. And then I'm going to access the text property, and I'm going to assign it an empty string. So here I'm just going to do a double quote and then another double quote. And remember, strings can be double quotes or single quotes, so I could just use 2 single quotes like that. Alright, so now I'm going to save it, I'm going to run this, and this time it's going to ask me for a main scene, or a default scene. And so there we go, and now you see my text cleared out. So this is just like what we did in Hello World. So at this point I've basically recreated the Hello World. We've just added some new extra elements. So let's take this one step further. Let's make this button do something when it's clicked. So to do that, we need to use something in Godot called signals. So I'm going to go back to my designer, I'm going to click my button, and over here in the inspector there's a tab for node, and then there's another little kind of sub tab here for signals. There's groups and signals. So I want to make sure signals is selected. Then here's all the different events that could happen for this type of node, and they're different based on what kind of node you have selected up here. So if I click on a label, I may not have the clicked or pressed event. So maybe for line edits, I've got events for when the text was changed, so you could maybe make the guess happen automatically when they type the number. But in this case, we're going to do it off the button, so we're going to do button pressed. Now I can either double click here, or I can come down here while this is selected and hit connect. Alright, so I get another modal here, and this one is going to create the signal between my button and my code. And so right here it says connect to node, so I need to pick a node with a script that I want to connect my button to. And so I want it to attach to that script that I made on the main node. So I'm going to select that right there. And then down here, you don't need to worry about this. It'll be taken care of automatically by picking it in this window here. These all are fine with the defaults. The method in node, by default, it always calls the signal with an underscore on, and then the name of the node that's creating the event. So in this case, button make guess, which is what I named it right here, and then the event that occurred that caused the signal to happen. And so in this case, it was the pressed event. Alright, so I'm going to leave all this just fine. Make function on, so that'll create the function automatically for me, and these I'll leave by default. So I'm going to hit connect. Alright, so I'm back at my code on my main node. There's my text, my code that I wrote to clear out that label text, and here is my new function that was just created by that signal. So it's on, make button guess, pressed, and by default it just puts the pass in there, so nothing will happen when the button's pressed. But let's change this and use our good old print statement that we use for debugging, and we'll just say button pressed. Alright, so let's try this out and see if it worked. So I'm going to play my game, I'm going to click my button, and there it is, button pressed. So each time I push the button, that code will get run and executed that's within this function. And remember, the function starts right here. The block of code starts right after that colon, and I have to make sure and indent my code over, and when that indentation stops, that's when the function stops. So if I come over like that and I do a print statement here, that won't be run as part of this function. Matter of fact, I get an error because it doesn't like having a print statement there. Alright, so far we've created our scene. We've got it all drawn out. We've got our result label, and we're able to access it in code. And we've also attached our button with a signal and been able to make some code execute when that button was pressed. Okay, so the next part, we need to tackle a couple of new programming fundamentals that are extremely important. And the first one we're going to tackle is variables. So variables I like to think of as a box. So if I come back over here, I'm going to scoot down a little bit, and let's draw some pictures, illustrations to help us here. So I like to think of a variable as a box. And a box, like if I'm packing for a trip or something, or moving, sometimes I'll label a box. So I'll say like kitchen. Right? And into that box, I put things. And usually I put things that are related to whatever I name that box. So in programming, variables are kind of like boxes, and those variables can have names, and so those names can be used in place of the value that I stuff into the box. Right, so this sounds a little bit confusing, but we'll see some examples here in a minute, and hopefully it'll make some more sense. But think of variables as either boxes or shortcuts to values, and those values can change. So maybe I have so let's do a more concrete example. So I'm going to have in our game, we're going to have a variable, and we're going to call it hidden number, right? So hidden number is going to be the number that we're trying to guess, right? That the player is trying to guess. So the computer is going to come up with a number, so let's just say for argument's sake it's going to be 3, and we're going to stuff it into hidden number. Alright, now later we can use that hidden number by comparing the guess that the player makes. So the player, he's going to type into his keyboard a number, right? And he's going to say maybe 5, right? And so then we can look at this number right here and hidden number right here and give them a result of whether or not they got the right number. So for that, we'll probably use another variable. So we'll use another variable box right here, and we'll call it the player's guess. Alright? So variables are used all over in programming and are extremely important. Matter of fact, we've already used one. Right here, this is called a member variable. So this node right here, label result, has a property called text, and that is just a variable holding a string that says your guess was. So this line edit guess also has a variable called text, and it's currently holding a string with 5 in it. So that's kind of the basics of variables. So what we're going to do here is we're going to jump into our code, and we're going to create our 2 variables that we are going to be using. So the first variable we're going to do is we're going to put it up here at the top, and we're going to make the hidden number, and we're going to set it to something for a default, and we're just going to say it's going to be 3. Then when the player clicks the button, we're also going to go and we're going to get the value out of this line edit guess node, and we're going to store that in another variable called player guess. And here I'm going to call this a string. I'm going to call it player guess as string, and we'll see why in a minute. So if you remember, in order to get a value, or in order to set the text value, we put the assignment, or we get the node, and then we put the assignment on the right hand side. But we can also reverse this, and we can put this on the right hand side. So I'm just going to copy this, I'm going to paste it right there. So if I put it on the right hand side, the assignment will go from that node's text box, and it will go into the player guess as string variable. Now if I ran this just as it is, you can probably guess what would happen. So here, let's do that real quick. I have a typo, and it's because I copied this instead of typing it out. So let's print this variable. That's a good way to debug our code. So I'm going to go print, and I'm going to copy this in there. That's my big variable. Let's run that and see what happens. I make guess. I don't see anything. There's a reason for that. Let's do that. So what I've just done here is I've passed my ready function and I commented this out. So commenting is a really useful tool. Remember the hashtag comments out code. It's a really useful tool because if I have code that's doing something and I want to test my program without that code, I can just add a hashtag before it, and now this code will not be run in my program, and if I need to get that back, all I've got to do is delete that one character and I get my whole line back. So I'm going to run this, and we're going to click that button, and it says your guess was. So what happened? That matches this up here. So if I look down here, oh, here's my problem. I pulled panel, label result, and then I got the text property from that, which was your guess was. So that was my typo. So I'm going to jump back into my code, and instead of label result, what I really want is line edit guess. Right? Oops. Remember, this is case sensitive, so if I typed like this, if I went line edit guess, and I didn't make any of these capital letters like I did over here, this would not work. I would get one of those null exceptions. So I'm going to make those match, and I'm going to play, and I'm going to make guess. Ah, there's my 5. Excellent. That's what I wanted to see. So now I've got 2 variables. I've got one with my hidden number and one with the player guess. Let's actually let's do something else. Let's print the hidden number so we can see what it is. And then I've got my player guess printing right there. And let's run that. So as expected, I'm going to see my 3 just like I assigned it up here, and I'm going to see my 5, which is what was in the line edit guess. And if I type in another number, say a 7, I say make guess, I'm going to see my 3 is going to stay the same, but I'm also going to see the 7 because I updated that value. Alright, so down here it's hard to tell which one is which, so let's label these. So I can do that by adding a string right here, and I can say this is my hidden number, right? And then I can use a plus sign, which is a concatenation, which just means that it's going to stick one string to another, right? So I'm going to do that here as well. I'm going to say this one is player guess. I'm going to do another plus sign, and I'm going to get an error, and the reason we'll look at in a second. Let's look and see what error I get. So invalid operands string and int in operator plus. Wow, that's confusing. But what it's saying is this is an operand of, so the operator here is the plus operator, and the operands is hidden number and this string, and it's saying that this string, so this is this string right here, and int, so it's saying hidden number is an int. So if you watch my breakdown video, you'll remember that we have different types of variables. We have whole numbers, which are called integers or ints. We have decimal numbers, which can contain decimal points, which can float, or floating point numbers, because that period can float around. And we also have strings, and those are single or double quotes with any number of characters inside of them. Alright, so those are our 3 basic value type variables, and what I've got here is I've got an integer and a string, and the plus sign doesn't know how to combine those. So what I need is a way to convert this from an integer, a whole number, into a string so that I can concatenate them together using this plus sign. So for that, there's a couple of convenience methods built into Godot, and they're used just kind of like this print statement, but they are called conversion functions. And in this case, I want to convert to a string, so I'm going to use the string conversion function, and that should work. So let's give that a shot. I'm going to stop it, play it again, and I'm going to hit make guess, and there we go. So it says hidden number, colon, and then I've got the 3 right there, and here I've got player guess and the 5. Now you notice I didn't have to put this string here on player guess as string, and the reason for that is this text box is already in a string format. So that means to the computer this is not a number, it's actually a string like this. So it would be the same as if I'd said so I'm just going to call it as string, and I'd put, you know, the number 5 in there. And in programming, this number 5 is not the same as that. So you notice it even color codes it differently. So this has got like a pink and this is an orange, and that's to indicate this is a number and this is actually a string with the character of a 5 in it. So what I need to do in order to do math, so in this case I needed to convert to a string to concatenate those two strings together, but what I need to do in order to compare my 3 up here, my hidden number, to the player's guess, is I actually need to do the reverse. I need to convert to a number. So what I'm going to do is above this, I'm going to go var player guess as int. And so in order to make that conversion, I'm going to use that assignment again, and I'm going to use the int helper function here, conversion function. And then I'm going to pass in my player guess as a string, and it will take care of converting it to a number for me. So if I put that right there and I do player guess as integer here, I should get that same error that I got a minute ago. There it is. String and int are not compatible with this plus sign, so I need to convert this one now as well. And make sure I have the right number of matching parentheses. So if you have a function call inside of another function call like I do here, you have to make sure that I have a set of parens right here for this one and a set of parens back here for this one. And Godot even helps you out a little bit. You notice when I click right there, it underlined this one and it also underlined that one. So that way I know I have a matching set of parentheses. Alright. So there we go. So now they're both printing again, and I know that this is as a number because I had to convert it there using I converted it using the integer conversion function, and then I knew it was an integer because I had to convert it back to a string there in order to print it. Alright, so that was variables, and the other programming fundamental we need to look at is called if statements. And if statements are a way for code to branch. So let's scooch down again and let's do another little drawing here. So code runs from top to bottom, one line at a time. It executes each line at a time, just like that. 1, 2, 3, like that. But if we didn't have a way to branch, programs could never do anything differently. They would always do the same thing every time you ran them. So what we want, or what we use the if statement for, is for branching. So an if statement can take that logic and branch it out. So I could have some statements over here and some statements over here, And based on a condition that goes into the if statement, I may run these or I may run these. So that's what an if statement is for. So let's take a look at that, what that looks like in code. So I need to, if I started right here, I'm going to get an error because that's not in line with my other code. So I'm going to bump that out, come right back up here. I'm going to put a little white space in there to help me separate my number conversions and my if statement. So I'm going to do a basic if statement, and the first one I want to do is I want to check to see if they got the right number. So this should be easy. The syntax of the if statement is if, then a space, and then the Boolean expression, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but the Boolean expression that is the condition of whether or not this if statement should be executed, if the body of this if statement should be executed. So let's do hidden number, paste that in. Then Boolean expressions use a comparator operator, and in this case I want the double equals, which says does the left hand side equal the right hand side. So then I'm going to use my player guess as integer, because remember my hidden number is an integer because I typed it in as a whole number there. And then finally, like all block statements, just like function is a block statement and ends with a colon, so does the if statement. So it has to end with a colon, and then as you notice my error here, it says expected indent after block after if. And what that means is if I hit enter, it's going to by default shift me over again, and so this will be the code that is executed if this statement is true. This Boolean statement is true. So Boolean expressions have only two values, and those values are, let's do a little truth table here, true and false. So a value is either true or false. And let's see. So in this case, well, here, let's just do it by example. That'll probably be better. So what I want to do here is, we've already done this before. Oh, let's put this back. Right? So now it'll clear out my text again for my label result. But I'm going to copy that, save myself some time. I'm going to paste it in right there. Make sure when you paste it in that you get that white space to indent it over for your if statement. And instead of the empty string, I'm going to say, you guessed my number. Alright? And let's try this out and see what happens. So if I click the button, I see my debug text, but I don't see the you guessed my number. But I know it's 3 because I can see it right here, so let's make the guess again. Ah! You guessed my number. Excellent. So I can tell that if my number is not on, it's not going to set it. Now, you notice right there I actually had a bug. If I guess the number and then I guess a different number, I don't reset this. So I can fix that real quickly. Let's erase this and let's put it up here at the top of the button press, and we'll just set it back to the empty string. So let's stop that, start it again. So I'm going to guess the correct number, get it up there, and then let's guess something else. Now it goes away. That's good. That's what we wanted. So you can tell that my if statement is running this code when I get the correct number. So when this condition is true, right there, it is running this, and when I get the statement wrong, it is not running this. Alright, so that's awesome. That's how the if statement works. I'm going to delete this line right here because it's pretty obvious our button's getting pressed, and it just kind of fills up my log a little bit quick. I don't need it anymore. So I need another statement. So I could do this with another if statement. I could now make sure you pop back, because if I put another if statement here, it would only execute this if statement if this one was true. But in this case, I want it to run every time. So another comparator operator or Boolean operator is the greater than and less than signs. So I can do hidden number is let's say less than or greater than. Actually, let's reverse this. Do player guess as int is greater than hidden number. So if my player guess was 5 and my hidden number was 3, then this would execute because 5 is greater than 3. But if it was the other way around, if I guessed 2 and the hidden number was 3, this would not run. So let's do the same thing here. Let's grab this and paste it, making sure I'm indented over correctly, and I'm accessing the correct label result. That's good. And instead of you guessed my number, let's say your guess was too high, right? Because the guess was greater than the hidden number. And we'll make one more of these, and I'll just grab the whole thing, paste it, making sure my indentation is at the correct level that I expect. And instead I'm going to say it's lower than hidden number, and I'm going to say that's too low. Alright, let's play this and see what happens. So if I guess 5, my guess was too high. If I guess 1, it's too low. If I guess 3, you guessed my number. Alright, so we've got our game is working just the way we expect it to now. The only thing lacking is the number never changes. Every time I play this game, I know the number's always going to be 3, so there's not much challenge to it. So let's figure out a way to change that number. So up here I'm setting it to 3, and if you think about this, I want to do this operation one time, so where would I put that? If you said in the ready function, you were correct. So I want to put it here, and I'm going to use something called random. And in Godot, if I look this up, you'll see Godot's GD script has a function called randomize. Let's look at that. Alright, so it randomizes the seed or initial state of the random number generator. Alright, so it reseeds it based on time. So in computers, they don't really have a sense of complete randomness. They have a set of random numbers, and each time if you use that same set of random numbers, it would eventually become predictable. So what they do is they multiply it or add some math computation based on the current time, which is constantly changing, and that gives you a real sense of randomness. And you also notice up here, if I scroll around, I see a bunch of other random functions. And look at this one. This one says rand I returns a random integer and use the remainder to obtain a random value between 0 and n. Alright, so rand I with this modulus operator or percent sign of 20 returns a random number between 0 and 19. Wow, that's fantastic. That's exactly what I'm looking for. I want a number between 1 and 10, right? So let's use this right here. So I need the randomize, and I also need this right here. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to type randomize. So that should give me a random seed so that the random function is different every time. And then rand I percent, and I don't want to go all the way to 100, I just want to go to 10, and then the +1, right? So that shifts the number up, because if you look at these, they go between 0 and 19, and what I want is between 1 and 10. So I'm going to do that +1 there to shift that number up. Alright, so if I do this, all it's going to do is generate that number, and it's going to float off into nothingness. But so what I want to do is I want to stick that in the hidden number. How would I do that, do you think? If you thought of the assignment operator, you're correct. So I'm going to assign this to hidden number. And if you remember, the right hand side goes into the left hand side of the assignment operator. So now if I run my game, and I'm clever, I'm going to pick 3. Wait, it's too high. I thought it was always 3. Let's pick another number. 1 is too low. 2 guessed the number. So you notice down here the number was 2. Let's try it again. This time it's 4. Let's try it again. This time it's 2 again. This time it's 7. So you notice that number is different every time, and since we have such a small number, there's only 10 different options, or actually 9 different options, that we'll occasionally get the same number again. If we used 100 here, we would get quite a bit different. It would be pretty rare that we would get the same number every time. Let's undo that. Let's leave it at 10. And you'll notice this is fine that I did this. I initialized my variable with a 3, and then in the ready function I changed that to a different number. And that's okay. Variables can change, so I can assign them a number to start with, and then I can add numbers to them. If I have strings, I can concatenate different strings into them and stick them back into the variable. Those variables can change. They're just a shortcut or a box, and that box, as we looked at here, I could put something in there, and then I could take it out and put something else in there. Alright, so that's our Guess My Number game.